So next up, we have Tim Tyler, who is a principal solutions engineer and also a Docker captain. He's a leader and senior contributor to MetLife's innovation team, the ModSquad, which we heard about today during this morning's keynote. So please help me welcome Tim.
Thank you. My name is Tim Tyler, and I want to talk a little bit about how we manage change and disruption at MetLife. And we did it on a team we called the ModSquad. So this is learn fast, fail fast, deliver fast, the ModSquad way. And I just want to talk about the word ModSquad for a minute because it's pretty cool. If you remember, it was a show from like the 60s or something like that with a bunch of really hip people. Well, 3 anyway, that were hip. And that name seems to have resonated outside of MetLife even. It's interesting. I go around in the community now, and even here at DockerCon, and talk to people who saw my discussion and my colleague Aaron Ade's discussion at the Austin DockerCon, and they ask me about that. They say, "Hey, you're the ModSquad guy," which is kind of weird, but I think in a good way. So I'm going to talk about disruption and innovation. I'm going to talk about an unstoppable force and immovable objects. I brought that up at the Austin talk as well. And then I'm going to talk about the ModSquad and how we did what we did and what are some of the things that we learned and some of the things that we really did well along the way. Interestingly, if I go back for a second, if you don't know, in terms of unstoppable forces and immovable objects, I did want to just kind of give a shout out to the LIGO telescope, which yesterday announced the discovery of 2 colliding neutron stars, which is pretty unstoppable and immovable, in my opinion. So our work at MetLife wasn't quite that dramatic. Oops, I went back too far. What I'm really going to talk about is what the heck did MetLife do that worked and that continues to result in ongoing benefits to the business and in new areas. So one day, about 1.5 years ago, our devs had this new idea. And it was called microservices. And nobody knew what that meant. And then some architects climbed aboard and they started explaining to everybody, well, what does this mean? What are these microservices that you speak of? And all of a sudden people said, oh, wow, we can do these awesome new blue-green deploys and have rolling updates and things. And the DevOps said, this is going to be nirvana. We're going to build these cool pipelines, these delivery pipelines and development pipelines. They're going to streamline our time to market. And then the infrastructure folks came along and said, wow, you know what? We can really reduce our infrastructure costs as a result of this, maybe up to 70%. I actually have seen numbers a little higher than that. And then engineering sees new stuff, and they said, wow, okay, we're going to have to do a bunch of new things. We're going to have to build new monitoring services and new logging services. We're going to have to figure out how to monitor this ephemeral environment with things that come and go and scale up and down. And then the ops folks say, whoa, this is really complex, guys. We don't know how to manage this microservices environment that you speak of. And then someone says, well, what about our traditional apps? My colleague over here, Jeff Murr, brought that up today. And he says more cost reductions. We're going to take our traditional apps and drive that into even bigger cost reductions at MetLife. And then reality sets in, and it's disruption. It's boom. It's everybody saying, how are we going to pull this off? How can a big company like MetLife that moves very slowly in general in terms of change and does not adapt very rapidly to disruption like maybe smaller startups out of San Francisco might, how are they going to do something like this in under 2 years? Because we had a timeline, and it was 5 months. So is that really what happened? Yeah, that is pretty much exactly what happened. And I bet something like that happens to a lot of you guys and a lot of other companies. So let me tell you a little bit more about MetLife. It's a Fortune 43, I think they called it now. We were Fortune 40. I guess we dropped a couple of digits. It's huge. We live around the world. And we have to, we're constrained by different sovereignty laws all over the world. So when we talk about a Docker cluster at MetLife, we're not talking about something that's big and giant in the United States of America. We're talking about lots of little balkanized clusters that we spread around the world. For every country that we deliver into, we deliver right now 3 to 5 environments. We'd have production, DR, which collectively make production, QA, int, and dev. In some cases, dev still lives in the US for those countries, but we have to deploy these little microclusters. We're working towards a multi-tenant solution to simplify that a little bit, but we don't have today a big monolithic infrastructure at MetLife in terms of our Docker environment. So we said, how are we going to pull this off? What are we going to do to deliver in 5 months this really disruptive new thing? And we built, we came up with a path to follow, which was when we knew we needed to be high velocity. We knew we needed to move fast, and we knew that we couldn't let normal things slow us down. We couldn't have analysis paralysis. And we needed to fail fast. We knew that if we made a mistake, we needed to recognize it immediately and pivot and make it a success. We had to be agile and develop new methodologies that we weren't comfortable using. We had to move from waterfall to a more agile, Scrum-based methodology. We integrated Kanban boards to help us with our workflows. We addressed multiple areas of disruptive technologies during this first arc that we did in late 2016. So not only did we tackle containers, but we brought in some ancillary technologies like chatbots and things like that as well. It kind of popped out that we found were enablers for us to do the primary goal that we had, which was to deliver this Docker environment for our microservices. We wanted to bring innovators into this team, and we wanted to empower them to make decisions that stuck. So they can make a decision very rapidly that could see its way into production and last for several years in terms of naming conventions or deployment conventions or things like that. So we pulled the team together and we called it the ModSquad. It's a cross-functional team. I'll talk a little more about that cross-functionality in a few minutes. It's extremely focused on 1 or 2 problems. It's very diverse, and we're very proud of that diversity. The team embraces risk and change. To a certain extent, it breaks some of our internal rules while it embraces that change. So it does circumvent some of the more structured policies that we have for looking at new tooling and things like that, which was a necessity for us to deliver this environment on time. We have a common and open work area. This is fairly typical at MetLife in general, but we made it more open. We packed it with shiny things. The ModSquad got all the new toys, and it was really cool. We shook up the culture and hierarchy. We definitely ran into cases where some of the other teams who were accustomed to doing more traditional work would step back and say, hey, you guys are moving really fast, and we don't know if we can adapt to this change. But ultimately, we did, as a company, adapt to the change and made it a success story. And we gave our team the freedom to explore new things. So we have several norms that we applied to the ModSquad. We formalized it after that first arc, for one. In the first arc, we said, well, we're going to pull this team together and we're going to do this thing. But then we said, this really worked, and we want to do this thing again and again, and we also want to pollinate what we did to other parts of the organization. So we formalized the ModSquad to protect the culture of the ModSquad and the speed of the ModSquad, and to start to take the knowledge that we learned in the ModSquad and pollinate it out to our other engineering team. It was cross-functional, and it spanned many, many different knowledge areas at MetLife. It has a rotational membership now. It's somewhat divided. There are core team members who are not rotational, who are permanent team members of the ModSquad. And then there's a rotational member component that we bring in and out. And I'll actually go over in a few minutes who the rotational components are. And what our goal there is, again, we want to take this new work methodology, this agile, fast, high-velocity methodology, and we want to pollinate it out to the other engineering teams. And we're starting to see that happen. I can think of at least 2 teams now that are not part of the ModSquad, but have membership that has been in the past part of the ModSquad that are adopting these new fast-paced, agile engineering and design methodologies. So that's the good news. We also want to break down the silos at MetLife so that we get more conversations going between the networking team and the monitoring team, or the monitoring team and the application development team. And again, we want to create a permanent collaboration space where people feel comfortable coming together and working together. There are a few key success factors that really enabled all of this to come together and be a success for MetLife. And probably the biggest one was executive recognition. We had top-down support. This was not a grassroots, ground-up thing that we did. And at least for MetLife, I don't think that would have been nearly as successful as what we pulled off. That may not be the case. Our recipe might not work for everyone, but hopefully by the time I'm done, you'll have some ideas that you could incorporate into how you could bring a disruptive change like Docker to the table. We had frequent visibility from our executives. I can't remember a week that went by over that 5 to 6 month period in our first arc where we didn't have some senior executive from either the US or some other country coming into our workspace and talking with us directly. And it was pretty cool. And 100% of the time, they got really excited about what they were seeing and what they were hearing. I remember we had, I don't have a picture of it, I probably should put a picture up of a really pretty Grafana dashboard that we would kind of keep perpetually sitting on a big display that sat in the area. And it was basically eye candy, but it was a real-time display of the environment that we were building. And they would come in and they would take selfies of themselves against this Grafana display. And for some reason, that really resonated with them. And they really connected with that. And as a result, connected with the team and fully supported it. We made sure that the team members were treated equally, no matter where they were in their career, no matter how junior or how senior they were. I remember an occasion once where, well, I should say in some cases there's some stratification at big companies. And I remember a case where I joined a personal lunch with one of our team members, and she was a junior team member in her career, but I came along with one of our VPs and sat down, and one of her colleagues leaned over and said, "That's the VP so-and-so. What are they doing here?" And my team member looked over at her colleague and said, "That's just Aaron." It happened to be Aaron Age, our keynote speaker from Austin. She said, "That's just Aaron. You know, he's not a VP. I mean, he was, but he's just Aaron, and he just works with us." And it was pretty cool that we had that, you know, equality amongst the team. And we feel very good about the diversity of the team, and that was a key contributor to our success. And you actually can't see the last line very well. I didn't realize that. It could be because it's not on my laptop. But we got shiny things. We got the toys. We got the cool stuff. They brought down these group chat boards for us to play with. We got a Microsoft Surface at one point and got to play with that. We had these neat collaboration tools with cameras and stuff that we kind of got first looks at these things. And a lot of our management members would come over and say, "Hey, can you guys play with this and see if you can do something cool with it?" And we would, in most cases, do something pretty cool with it. So I said that we embraced diversity and that we were really proud of that, and we were and we still are, because we think that the diversity of this team was critical to its success. The diversity brings different points of view from all the different team members. And again, it doesn't matter where they were in their career. If they were junior in their career or senior in their career, they were treated exactly the same with respect to their ideas and their contributions. You know, we had wonderful gender diversity and ethnic diversity. So, you know, we continue to try to build that into the team. And we think it builds empathy for our colleagues and our customers. I can remember one point that kind of highlights this. We had an application designer on the team, and he came over to one of our engineers on the team one day, and he said, "You know, working on this team has been really cool because I used to sit in my application designer bubble and think, you know, all I have to do is say, hey, I need to fire up this new app and get it running. And I wonder, why the heck does it take engineering a week to fire up this app? Why do I have to wait?" And he says, "Now I get it. I get it that when I toss this over the wall, that you have to go do a lot of other stuff. You have to set up VIPs, you have to set up load balancers, you might have to set up firewalls, you might have to do all of this other stuff just to make my app work that I can fire up on my laptop in 2 seconds. So that was pretty cool to break down that wall and hear them say, "We get it." And we saw that from AD to engineering, from networking to engineering, from engineering to operations, just kind of across the board. We saw these walls start to fall down and everybody start to get what they didn't previously get. It broadens the team's perspective, and it enriches our team's overall experience so that they're as productive as possible. And I'll dive into that a little bit more as well. So from a team behaviors point of view, we encourage certain things when someone joins the team. In some cases, we look for these specific behaviors when we invite somebody to join the team. But we encourage the fact that we learn from our mistakes and obstacles as well as all of our successes. And that's part of the title, Fail Fast. Don't be afraid to fail, but when you fail, figure it out really quick and learn from it and make it into a success. I have a couple of anecdotes on that one, which are kind of funny. One of our team members one day broke one of our lab environments terribly. And we needed the lab environment, and we didn't have it. But the track that we took in that case was helpful encouragement. We said, fix it. Just go fix it, and you're going to learn that breaking this environment isn't nearly as bad as you think it is, because she was pretty shook up about it. And we helped her out when she needed it, but for the most part, she was able to dive back in, and she rebuilt this environment, and now she knows a heck of a lot more about that particular environment than she knew going in. The other anecdote was one about me, actually. I did a lot of work on our monitoring solution for our Docker deployments. And when we first started this, we didn't know a whole lot about monitoring a containerized environment. But we learned pretty quick. The first thing we learned was that we did not have a solution internally at MetLife that could monitor a containerized environment. So we had to go out and find something, and we had to find it pretty quickly. So we made a list of, I think it was a dozen different possible monitoring solutions. And we started to smoke test them about 2 per day. And at the end of the week, we picked one of them. And I remember the week or two after that, we were sitting in a meeting with some MetLife executives. And one of my VPs looked at our executives and said, he said, Tim failed every single day. He failed. He came to work and he failed. And he was literally saying that. I was kind of shocked because the message was not quite the way I would have articulated it. But what he meant was we failed really fast. And it eventually became clear. We failed really fast, and we solidified on a solution by the end of 1 week. And this was before the Austin DockerCon, and myself and Aaron Ades came out for DockerCon, and we kind of walked away and said, wow, we made some awesome decisions, because everybody else, or most everybody else is doing exactly what we did. We picked right. We failed, but we succeeded right at the end of the day. And we standardized MetLife on a monitoring solution that's fairly common for Docker environments today. Someone might ask what that is at the end of the talk, and that would be Prometheus with Grafana dashboards. We encourage our members to think outside of the box and encourage them that there are always new ways to solve a problem. Don't go down the standard path, go down the alternate path and think outside of the box. Work outside your area of expertise. If you're a networking guy, do some application design. If you're an AD guy, do some infrastructure work. If you're an infrastructure guy, do some storage management work as part of these efforts. Don't worry about breaking things in our labs. I kind of gave an anecdote about that already. And that stands today. If you break it, fix it, or we'll fix it. It's no big deal, and everybody's going to learn something. Challenge the status quo. Just because it's been done a certain way for years doesn't mean that it has to continue to be done that way. So we encourage our team members to stand up and say, we shouldn't do that. And it doesn't matter if that relates to some big IT policy that wraps around how our Docker environments are going to sit behind firewalls, or even just down at our team management level. If someone stands up and says, I don't like this Kanban board that we're using. We should use this one over here because it's way better. Then we take that into consideration right away. And think like an entrepreneur. I don't have a good anecdote for that one, but what I thought Steve said today was pretty cool. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think he said, make the world what you want it, not what it is. And that kind of fits, I think, into that think like an entrepreneur mentality that we try to pass on to our team members. So Daniel Pink, and this is a great book, Drive, if you haven't seen it, writes about high performance and personal satisfaction. Who are the highest performers on a team, or how can you make a team a high performer? And we adopted these ideas: mastery, autonomy, and purpose as part of the ModSquad. Mastery is the opportunity to get better at something that you care about. It's the opportunity to become a subject matter expert in a field that you care about, and it might not even be the field that you're working in. So we could see a subject matter expert evolve in terms of a storage solutions engineer out of somebody who's traditionally been an application designer on the ModSquad. Choice over what work to do or who to work with. And in this case, when we build our sprints and our plans, we encourage people to jump in and take the work that you're interested in doing, not the work that we're telling you to do. We encourage people to seek out what gives them the most satisfaction in terms of the work that we're going to do on one of our arcs. And then being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And this was really important for the Mod Squad. Because what we did was so much bigger, because it strikes at the heart of MetLife's digital transformation strategy. And it strikes at the heart of how we're going to deploy services going forward over the next 5 to 10 years. One of my colleagues, his name is Lance Roller, he's an AVP at MetLife, was key to forming this team originally and putting the boundary conditions on the initiative that we had. And he said, and I like this is my favorite quote about the Mod Squad, "Each of us can fail, but we can succeed fast, and we're all going to learn together." And that's exactly what happened. And it kind of summarizes everything that I just said, for me anyway, with that quote. So how did we put it all together? So that's all the fluffy stuff. How did we really put it together functionally? We focus on 1 or 2 disruptions at a time. For a long time, we were just going to focus on 1 disruption. Now we focus on a couple, and we think that's tractable. Mod Squad leadership will be key contributors to the performance reviews for the team members that are on the Mod Squad. Because we pull from a cross-section of the organization, that's a big deal. The Mod Squad cannot function effectively if we're not able to give performance feedback to the functional managers for the people that are on this team. We engage platform engineering and operations early to ensure a smooth transition from our innovation state ultimately to production. We're still getting better at that. And if you saw my Austin talk, you'll know that we were not necessarily great at that during the first arc. The team is rotational with dedicated team members, and those resources are intended to be fully allocated for the duration of a particular arc that the Mod Squad is going through. Arcs are intended to last 4 to 6 months. Members' day-to-day work will be assigned by the squad. What that really means is the members will pick up the work that the squad creates independently. So they'll go in, like I said before, and pick the things, generally speaking, that they want to work on, but that pool of things will be assigned by the squad. And we do not hold on to technologies for more than 4 months. So once something is operationalized, we begin to back away from it as rapidly as possible, and no longer than 4 months. And this is what the organization, for the most part, looks like. We have a senior VP executive sponsor, and then we have an executive steering committee. The executive steering committee is intended to meet quarterly and will set priorities for the Mod Squad. That is the things that we're going to work on and what kind of deadlines we're going to be working towards. The team will have a monthly meeting with the SVP of engineering, and then the Mod Squad, as I said before, will focus on 1 or 2 things at a time. Beneath the executive sponsor is a big arrow that says reports to, or reports, and that is comprised of 1 or more layers of management. And it's key to point out, because it's not clear from this slide, that communication from that senior VP down to the Mod Squad and vice versa is critical. So those layers of management, whether it's 1 layer or 3 layers or 4 layers, have to communicate vertically with each other so that we're properly communicating the priorities set by senior leadership down to the Mod Squad, and so that all of the team members on the Mod Squad have consistent expectations regarding their participation in the Mod Squad. So moving from left to right, from your point of view, I guess, we have a leader. That leader is responsible for setting daily directions and managing our daily stand-ups and making sure that things are moving along and that roadblocks are cleared and that there's nothing getting in the way of anybody getting their work done. We have an architect, and we have a solutions engineer. The solutions engineer is well, me, frankly. And I'm an infrastructure guy at heart, but this is my role on the Mod Squad. These 3 components are dedicated. They are the dedicated foundational members, and the intent is they'll be on the Mod Squad indefinitely. Then we have 3 foundational ad hoc members. The foundational ad hoc members are people that are identified for the criticality of their role feeding information into the Mod Squad, and they're permanent members, but they're not expected to contribute 100% of their time. And that's a security engineer, an operations engineer, and a networking engineer. And then we have 5 rotational slots. And the rotational slots, like I said before, usually are 4 to 6 month stints of 100% dedicated time. And that would be an automation engineer, an application developer, a platform engineer, a distributed engineer, and a database engineer. And that makes up basically the foundation of each mod squad. We will then draw in others as needed for subject matter expertise if we need it. And there's cases like we're starting on some big data arcs. So although we have some big data expertise contributing 100% to the team, we'll pull in additional subject matter experts as we go. So the team will grow and contract a little bit in 2-week cycles for the next 4 to 6 months. Some of the things that we learned is focus on a minimum viable product. It's an innovation team, not an operationalization team. And that's a key component to our success. We focus on building something that works. It's more than a proof of concept, but it should be less than something that's fully operationalized. And we don't operationalize. In our first arc, we did operationalize, and we learned that that did not work for us. We weren't experts at that, so we now hand that off to platform engineering teams to help us operationalize. We encourage the development of subject matter experts on the team, whether they're in database experts or networking experts. We encourage them to come up to speed and become a subject matter expert on the technologies that we're working on. As an example, recently I would have expected somebody to become a subject matter expert on Docker Enterprise Edition's Docker Trusted Registry product and know that inside and out. We would encourage a subject matter expert on the new role-based access controls for Docker Enterprise Edition. We innovate through open and ad hoc discussions. This is pretty cool. This was not what it was intended to be originally. Somebody wanted to have the team members able to allocate 10 to 15% of their time to work on fun pet projects. That was misinterpreted. And what it actually became was 2 2-hour meetings a week that were kind of free-form, open-ended innovation meetings. And the team would come together and just talk about out-of-the-box stuff that could relate to what we were working on or might be just total blue sky ideas. And that became a real important piece of the success of the Mod Squad all by itself. And that was weird to see happen because it was a misinterpretation of a completely different request. And then pay attention to the norms of the team. There's a lot of cat herding that goes on because it's easy for this multiplexed team to get pulled away when a crisis comes up and go deliver their expertise for something else. So we're constantly herding the norms and bringing people back in and making sure that things are moving seamlessly. And then we come to one of the immovable objects. There's a couple of movable objects. We removed one of them early on, and that was the business. The business immovable object was get executive support, and we were so successful with that that I forget to mention that sometimes. But the other immovable object was, again, operational handoff, which is where we were particularly challenged the first time through. We built an awesome Docker environment with a microservices application ready to go to production in 5 months, and we wanted to push it to production and make our deadlines, and we did. But the operations team finally said, whoa, this is all new. And although many of them worked with us, by and large, the bulk of them said, we don't know how to operationalize this. We don't know how to manage this or to fix it. So one of my biggest areas of feedback for Docker implementation in particular is don't underestimate operational handoff. Your ops team is probably global and far-flung, and they're not all going to know what a microservice is, much less how to fix one if it breaks. But you get to tell them, don't worry, right? Because if it breaks, you just start a new one, and everything's great. Everything's new, you know, and it's just very intimidating for them. How do you monitor it? How do you prevent sprawl? How do you prevent things from getting out of control? How do you prevent people from running things they're not supposed to run? How do you tell if the applications inside the containers are healthy versus just the containers themselves are healthy? You have to teach them all of this, and that is often an immovable object. So this is how we feed innovation now to production. We have the cross-functional team called the Mod Squad, which is the innovation team. The business value is primarily the velocity of that team. How fast can it move? How fast can it deliver? And can it do so at an order of magnitude higher than our traditional design approaches? And for us, the answer has been yes, and it's a repeatable process. We're on our 3rd iteration now, and it's working. We take that innovation and that minimum viable product that we build, and we deliver that to platform engineering to operationalize that. And they work to push it out to operations, and I think this is essentially app ops. This particular laptop misrendered that box, but they work to operationalize the solution, not the ModSquad. So at one point, we did this Campy video. It was like a 3-minute video, and we had a professional production team come out, and there were drones flying around, and we all had a part to play, and it was for executive management and visibility and kind of marketing the notion of the ModSquad. And at the end of that video, I thought about playing the end, but this kind of gets the point across. Many people on the team were asked to say something, and what they said were, we are problem solvers. That is, we go fix things. We figure out, how to make something work. And we are disruptors because we're bringing change to the environment. And we are transformation and limitless. We can do anything, and we did. We are innovators and are expected to come up with new ideas and to push those to the company in ways that make sense and bring value to the company. We are the change and experimenters. And at the end of the day, they said, we are the ModSquad. And it was a cool video, even though it was campy. One of our executives, I think he was our chief technology officer, said this: you and the wider team collectively defined a new model for collaboration that not only helped address a critical challenge for MetLife, but is one that we will look to deploy more broadly across GTO. And that was really cool that he said that. And he said it because the team, after the first arc, the first successful production application on Docker, in the cloud even, going to production, the ModSquad was invited up to New York, because we live in North Carolina, for this big IT awards gala at the top of the Rockefeller Center. And he said basically this to the company. And it was really cool, and it was really validating, because it was the end of our first arc. It was only the first time that we had done this. And I've been so proud that at the highest echelons of our company, they look to us and they say, this is valuable to the company. And we did that. So can you do this? Or can anybody do this? And I think the answer is yes. Our recipe might not work for everyone, but I bet you there's some things that will work. I think that if MetLife can do it, as a giant regulated insurance company that is extremely risk averse, that almost any company can do this. But I think a key is getting executive support. I think without that, then it's an uphill battle. And ensure executive visibility. Make sure once you get that support that they see what you're doing and know what you're doing and have your back. And build and empower a diverse team that can deliver for you. So what's next for the ModSquad? Well, big data is big, and we're going to do that. We're looking at serverless, that's on the roadmap, or functions as a service. We're looking at artificial intelligence. This is a kind of backlogged stuff. Potentially new IaaS and PaaS ideas. And we just keep our fingers in chat ops and robots because we think they're seriously cool and can save lots of time for the company. So, again, my name is Tim Tyler. I put these QR codes on here maybe to make life easier. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and keep talking about this, then feel free to do so. I have a hallway track group chat tomorrow at 1 p.m. It'll show as full, but come if you want to talk more about this. I'm also got an adjacent one, I think after that, to talk about Docker Enterprise Edition. So if you want to come to either or both, please feel free to do so, because I'd love to share ideas and see if there's things that I haven't thought of or the ModSquad haven't thought of that would help us too. And then there's a link to my DockerCon Austin talk, of which this is sort of an expansion of. And I'd also encourage you, if you liked this talk, to give me feedback in the little app for DockerCon, because I'm always trying to improve my content and the things that I talk about and my presentation style. I'm very hopeful that, I think San Francisco is the next DockerCon, I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm very hopeful that Docker will ask me to come back and give a technical talk rather than a disruption talk, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So I need your feedback. I think that's the last slide. I was going to leave that up there. So. I think there's a protocol for questions. There's mics around if anybody wants to ask a question. I'll be here. I don't know if I'm here for 50 more seconds or 5 minutes and 50 seconds, but I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question, please. You mentioned that some traditional developers said, slow down, you move too fast. That's not how we do things. So how did you integrate more legacy mentality developers into the rapid pace of ModSquad? And how did you change their mentality so that they don't fear changing their skill set? Thanks.
Yeah, so our developers actually were the catalyst for the ModSquad. They were the ones that said, we're going to build a microservices application, and they didn't know what they were going to run it on. So for us, it was less about increasing the velocity of our developers because they were already moving into an at-speed environment. For us, it was taking what they were telling us they were going to do and finding the right environment to run it on. And that's probably not the best answer I can give you, and I might have to go back and think about that. So if you want to hit me up later, I might be able to think more about that and give a better answer as well.
All right, so you mentioned that having executive support was obviously critical, and I agree with that. Did you guys get that right away, or did you have to work for it? If you had to work for it, any tips on what you did to...
We got that right away. We have an excellent set of managers at the VP and associate, or assistant VP, I think. AVP is assistant VP level, that socialized this. They did this work before I even joined the company. I joined the company and basically started on this ModSquad. They did this socialization all the way up the food chain and got that buy-in in advance, and it was fantastic. When we were at the top of the Rockefeller Center in New York, they were C-stars coming up to us and saying, oh, you're the ModSquad, that is so cool. And I didn't know who they were, but I found out later, and I was like, wow, that is awesome. And they remain as supportive as they originally were. So I think it was really, it was wonderful leadership that for me and for the ModSquad team members that really socialized that up the food chain and got it to work and got it to stick.
So you talked about encouraging subject matter experts and also making sure that people were working outside of their comfort zones. Could you talk a little bit about how that works while you're also doing a rotational program? Yeah,
so the rotations are roughly 6 months. And during that period of time, our contributors have had the opportunity to become subject matter experts in kind of microcosms and macrocosms. And as I noted, I had one subject matter expert grow into a MongoDB expert. This contributor is really junior in her career, and she is part of the database team. So it's not a big stretch to see her growing, into a subject matter expert on a database technology, but she had not worked with MongoDB previously. And she is today, after her arc on the ModSquad, a key subject matter expert for MongoDB at MetLife today, in an engineering capacity. So that would be one case. I would be an example as well. I knew a little bit about Docker when I started with MetLife. I'd used it at my previous company, but I'd use it in pretty simple ways. It turned out that the simple ways I had used it were more complex than ways MetLife had at that time used it, which is one of the reasons why I came on board with MetLife. But I developed into a subject matter expert with Docker myself and was awarded that captain's badge just recently, which is really cool. So, we give people the time and the opportunity to make that development. It might not be manifested as an application designer becoming a subject matter expert in a storage technology. That probably takes more than 6 months. But it's certainly, there's certainly an expectation that people would stand up and become subject matter experts in different areas of the things that they're working on. That could be security, that could be orchestration, that could be Docker networking. There's just a kind of a litany of things that people can become an expert at in that ecosystem.
What's the exact responsibility of your team? I mean, do you produce new software, or you only modernize existing legacy applications? And do you deliver your products to end customers, or you deliver to normal operational teams for further development? So
the work that we're doing on MTA, modernizing traditional apps, is new. Our first arc was greenfield work. It was building a microservices-based application and delivering to production. It's a customer-facing application. That first delivery internally was pushed to ops by the ModSquad, but we've since pulled back on that, and we don't think that we deliver directly to ops anymore. Now we deliver to platform engineering, and they deliver to ops. The application itself almost 100% of the time is going, at least today, for our microservices application, will be a customer-facing, externally facing, internet-facing application. The MTA stuff is probably going to be more internal technologies, but that is, I am not personally directly involved in the MTA work that my colleague Jeff Murr is. So if you want to connect with him, he may be able to answer some specific questions about that.
During the transition period, what metrics you were collecting to show your progress?
I'm sorry.
During that period of development, what metrics you were collecting to show your progress?
Yeah, so basically, did we make our deadlines? The ModSquad was high velocity and very agile, and to be honest, we did not stick to any hard and fast metrics that we were following. We stuck to 2-week sprints, and we measured whether or not we were making our deliverables during those 2-week sprints, and if we weren't, we adjusted and adapted so that we got better and better at our sprint planning over time. And then we had our big deadlines that we had to meet, which we did meet. Some of the other kind of softer metrics that we looked at, though, was when we did our operational handoff, we absolutely took metrics on how effective our operations teams were becoming at supporting this new environment over time, and we measured this increase in effectiveness over a several-week period, and were able to capture specific metrics on how quickly they could respond to and solve problems. I think we're out of time, actually.